Welcome to the Reflections Cast, where we invite you to join us in an exploration of the teachings of our dad, Skip Ross. In each episode, we will listen to a talk or lecture from Skip, and then discuss what we might be able to apply to our daily lives and reflect on how they can inspire us to grow and change. We hope to continue his legacy and join our listeners in finding new insights and perspectives. Here's episode 12. Define it clearly and specifically. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Steve.
And I'm Melody.
And we are very happy to have you again this week for another awesome episode with Skip, talking all about goal setting. And this week, it is getting into the stuff. If you've been to the Circle A seminar, I feel like this is when we really start hitting that lesson that kind of weaves its way into what dynamic living is all about and the goal setting aspects that he talks about in the seminar. So I'm really excited to get into it. But before we do, I just wanted to quickly review where we've been, what we've been talking about. So in the last episode, we did talk about crystallizing our thinking, understanding what it is that we're striving for, and encapsulating it in a burning desire if we really want to make it something that lasts. I did have some questions that I heard after our episode, Melody, that I thought maybe we could talk about on the podcast, but it was, how do you keep the motivation going after you feel like the initial passion of whatever that goal has worn down?
Yeah.
So maybe that's something we can touch on at some point. I did want to get into it, but before we get into questions and fun stuff like that, I always want to invite you guys, the listeners, to give us some feedback. We really want to hear from you guys. We want to know if you guys are enjoying these episodes, if you have some subject matter that you really want Skip to do a lesson on. We've got some awesome recordings in all different subjects and categories of things, but we have our own idea of where we're going with this show. But if there's something that you really, really want us to hit on, send us a message. Either email us at thereflectionscast@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment on our YouTube channel or our Spotify, and we will look at that feedback and know that you guys are appreciating what we're doing. You will help us with our algorithms of search results and also help us steer the direction of the show. So please, if you're thinking about it, just send us a little comment. It'd be awesome. And I know that, Melody, did you have a story of feedback this week as well?
I did. I wanted to share. I walked out of my office today, and my office goes into my mom's office because we live together. And many of you probably know Susan. And she was just in there. And when I walked in, she just came up to me and she was just almost in tears, just saying that she had just listened to the last episode and that it was just so great. And it was Dad's dream coming to life. And she kept saying, I just need to know how to give the feedback on the podcast. And I'm like, what, Mom, what are you talking about? What are you trying to do? And she said, I don't know, but Steven keeps saying that you want feedback. And I just want to tell you how great it is. So I just wanted to just share with all of you that Susan is cheering for the Reflections Cast. She's cheering for all of you, all of us, as we, just listen to Skip's teaching and are reminded and encouraged to continue becoming the people that we're created to be. So thank you, Mom, for the feedback. And even though you couldn't figure out the Spotify voice recording, I gave my best impersonation here so that everyone can know your feedback. So thank you, Mom.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for the feedback, Mom. We do really appreciate it. And I think that the other great thing about this podcast is what it is an extension of, and that is the Pioneer Circle. So if you guys don't know what that Pioneer Circle is, Melody, could you inform them a little bit about what that's all about?
Absolutely. We're having lots of fun with the Pioneer Circle, adding families each week as we continue to grow towards 100 families. And the Pioneer Circle is just a space for mainly devoted to ages 8 through 18 who are ready to become pioneers in the world that we are building together. And so these pioneers and their families are coming together as the Pioneer Circle to grow together, to learn together, to talk about topics. Our last coaching session that we had together as a group was about taking responsibility. The I am responsible phrase that was one of Dad's favorites. And so we had a youth coaching session where we talked about what that can look like in their lives as they're continuing to grow, and think about the things that are their responsibility now and things that will be their responsibility by the time they're kind of 18 and going off on their own. And then we also had an awesome coaching session with the parents where we talked about just different ways that we can encourage our kids to grow in their self-discipline and their responsibility and their habits and things of that nature. So it's just a really encouraging and awesome environment for families and really for anyone who wants to stay super connected into what we're doing with Circle A. We've got video messages that come out multiple times a week sent straight to text. And then we also have an app that we set our goals in. So it's pretty awesome. We would love to have you or your family or families that you know become a part of the Pioneer Circle.
Excellent. And I love that the Pioneer Circle has that app available because it is going to fit in perfectly with these next couple of lessons. And that Skip talks a lot about that 3x5 card coming up. So get excited about that.
Absolutely.
But this lesson that we're going to listen to today, I think we could just call this lesson Storytime with Skip, because he does another excellent illustration through personal story. Mm-hmm. And it's a really great point, and it has a really great story attached to it. So I won't slow us down anymore. We'll get right into it with Skip, and we'll catch you on the other side. Here's Skip.
B, letter B, in our process is to define it clearly and specifically. Define it clearly and specifically. It's not enough to say, I want a new car. It's not enough to say, I want a new home. It's not enough to say, it'd sure be nice if I had a new tool, if I had a new TV, if I had a new electronic gadget. Not clearly enough, nor specifically enough defined. Stephen and I were talking this afternoon and talking about some of the earlier days of dynamic living and how I used to talk a lot about my own personal illustrations of these things. Because in those earlier days of dynamic living, they were so fresh to me. And they were so much a part of my life. And then as other people began using those same kinds of concepts and things began happening in their lives, and they began telling their stories, I began telling their stories instead of my stories. And we were just commenting as to whether or not that was a smart change for me to make, or whether I should have a greater balance of my own stories when I first began this process. And so since our conversation this afternoon, I began to think back along the goal-setting lines. And I recall the time when, in our experience in the Amway business, in order to get on the front cover of their monthly news publication, you needed to make diamond in our business. And when you made diamond, your picture was the full front cover of what in those days they called the ammogram. So on my 3x5 card, deciding what I really wanted to be a diamond. And so I wrote down on the card to kind of crystallize this whole concept for me, I'm on the front cover of the ammogram. The only way you can get on the front cover of the ammogram is to be a diamond. So I thought. So I started reading every morning, every night, 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 every morning, every night. I'm on the front cover of the ammogram. I'm on the front cover of the ammogram. I'm on the front cover of the ammogram. In the next 4 months, I was on the front cover of the ammogram 3 times, and I was not a diamond. You say, Skip, that must be coincidence. And I say, believe what you want to believe. I'll believe what I want to believe. You believe what you want to believe. You say, you mean to tell me that you think that if you had not written down I'm on the front cover of the Ammogram, you wouldn't have been on the front cover of the Ammogram those 3 times out of 4 months? I don't know. I don't know any way to go back and take it back, to experiment the other way. So I'm just going to leave it as it is. Now, the first time that I appeared on the front cover of the Ammogram was Susan and I had gone to Hawaii. And we were still a part of the second generation. And we led the second generation at Diamond Club. We weren't diamonds. We were second generation. And we were working with Bernice on her business. But we were not taking any public credit or recognition at all. So one day, a guy named Ed Bortolucci was a photographer for the company. We had become acquainted over the years, and he came to me and he said, I have a favor to ask of you guys. I said, sure. He said, I have waited all my life as a professional photographer. I have waited all my life to be in Hawaii and to scout out and plan and get my ideal Hawaiian sunset picture. He said, I found the spot. And he said, my vision is to have a couple silhouetted in this sunset between palm trees and the ocean behind them. He said, I found the spot. I just need the couple. Would you guys mind being the models for me? I said, we'd be delighted to. So that afternoon, about an hour before sunset, Susan and I went down to the spot he had designated. He was there with his camera and his rolls and rolls of film. And those days it was film, and there were 36 exposures on each roll. And he, in that hour and a half, took, as I recall now, 20 or 25 rolls of 36 exposures of Susan and I in the Hawaiian sunset. I mean, he was laying on the ground, he was up here, he was over there. He did it. He was absolutely in his glory as a photographer. And Susan and I just enjoyed it. And I said to him as we left, Ed, if any of those turn out, would you mind sending us one? He said, I'd be happy to. And that's the last we thought about it until about a month later. And there on the front cover of the Ammogram in that Hawaiian sunset was Skip and Susan Ross. The next month, there was a national convention coming up, and I was in the Sanborn Singers, which was a group of platinums and above who sang for the National Convention of Amway for some 15 years. They were talking about national convention in this issue of the Ammogram, and on the front cover of the Ammogram was the Sanborn Singers, and as big as life right there in the middle of the singers, Skip Ross. And then there was another trip that we had been on, and I don't recall, we were skiing. I think we were probably an achiever's trip of some sort. Yeah, they call it a Rama trip. And it was at Tahoe, and we were trying to learn to ski. And so here, because I'm there, I'm still not a diamond, but because I'm there, and here is, I think there were 6 other diamonds who were a part of the Hansen organization who were there, and me, and I'm trying to learn to ski. And, it was a great picture, but if they'd had a video of it, they'd have never used it. But there I was, 3 out of 4 months on the front cover of the Ammogram. So when I say to you, define it clearly and specifically, I wrote down I'm on the front cover of the Ammogram. There I was. I didn't say as a diamond. I should have been more specific. So, because another thing that happened to you when you made diamond is that you were invited to Rich DeVos's home or Jay Van Andel's home as a special guest at the Diamond Club that was held during the convention here in Grand Rapids. So on my goal card, I wrote down, I hadn't learned yet the full impact of define it clearly and specifically. I wrote down, I'm a personal guest in Rich DeVos's home. And I read it every morning, every night, 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 for about 9 months. And then we came to Grand Rapids for the National Convention. And I'm still reading. I'm not a diamond. I'm still reading my goal. I'm a personal guest in Rich DeVos's home. And that year, after the convention program was over, Rich had never done it before. He never did it again. He came backstage and he gathered the singers together after our finale. And he said, I just want to tell you guys personally how much I appreciate what you do for these convention programs. He says, as a token of my appreciation, I'd like to invite all of you to my home for a party tonight. And there I was, a personal guest in Rich DeVos's home. I wasn't a diamond, but I was in his home. So now I realize, okay, that's not going to work. So I knew the next year the Diamond Club would be invited to Jay Van Andel's home. I still hadn't figured out, define it clearly and specifically. So I started writing down I wrote on my goal card, started reading every morning, every night, every morning, every night, every morning, every night, every morning, every night, every morning, every night. I'm a personal guest in Jay Van Andel's home. So that went on month after month for the whole year. The next year we came, now at the close of that convention program that year, you know what I'm going to tell you, Jay Van Andel himself came backstage. Now he didn't very often talk to the group, but he came backstage, he gathered us all together after the finale, and he said, I just wanted to tell you how much I appreciate what you guys do for our program here. It wouldn't be the same without you. As a token of my appreciation, I'd like to invite all of you to my home tonight as my guests for a party. There I was, Jay Van Andel's home. I wasn't a diamond, but I was in Rich DeVos's home. I was in Jay Van Andel's home. I was on the front cover of the Ammogram, all of which had been on my card as a part of the goal of being a diamond, but I never defined it clearly and specifically connected with diamond. So when you write these things down, write them clearly and specifically. If you want a specific car, it's not enough to say, I want a new car. You need to write and define and describe the exact car that you want. The exact car. All the details. What color, inside, outside, what equipment, what engine, what even information that you won't fully understand. Define it as clearly and specifically as you can. Here's a thought. Why not define clearly and specifically the kind of person that you want to live with as your life partner? What are the characteristics of the person with whom you would invest your life? Why not define? Define it clearly and specifically. Whatever you want in your life, define it clearly and specifically.
All right, and that was our time with Skip. I know you guys want more, and there will be more next week, so stay tuned. But that was the teaching that we're going to focus on today with some awesome questions coming up, so get ready. But before we get into that, I think it's important that we just take a second, specify some of the lessons and some of the fun that he discussed in this last segment. So Melody, could you do a little summary for us of what you enjoyed from it?
Yeah, I think this is so fun to take these teachings in such bite-sized bits. I know I've said it before, but I can sit here and quote all the subpoints for all the principles from the seminar. And of course, define it clearly and specifically is, I can say it in my sleep, but to just think about that particular point and take a whole episode of the Reflections Cast to do that is really cool, because it feels like a part of the bigger thing, but it's its own point. It's its own important thing to think about. So I'm excited to do that for a few minutes today. And in this little segment, obviously, mostly he's telling stories. And I will say just a little disclaimer, these are some business specific stories. So if you're not familiar with the Amway business that Skip and Susan have been involved with for all these years, you might not know exactly what he's talking about. But the Ammogram is essentially a magazine that goes out to the independent business owners of Amway. And then when he's talking about Rich and Jay, they were the founders of the company. So they were very well known, especially at the time. So a little context if you're not familiar with those stories. So to summarize, what he talked about here, obviously he's talking about when we are setting our goals, when we are crystallizing or thinking about what it is that we want, there is a really important aspect of defining it clearly and specifically, and writing these things down in clear and specific ways. And that's the best way to achieve these goals effectively. So essentially he's saying, the vague statements of, I want a new car or something like that, it's not the most effective goal setting strategy to just say, I want a new car. There's ways that we can add more power to the work that we're doing by being really clear, specific, and writing it down. So, he shares these stories of his goals about being on the cover of the Ammogram and visiting the homes of Rich and Jay, which were interesting. And every time he tells this story, I'm like, for real? For real that happened? That's just kind of crazy. But I mean, it did. He's told the story for a lot of years. And so I love that. I think he's essentially encouraging us to really be detailed in the goals that we're setting, not just in the things that we hope will happen from the goal. But in this specific case, he hadn't written a goal of going diamond. He'd written some goals about things that would happen when he did. And those things ended up happening before the diamond qualification was achieved. So, I think applying what we're learning here to just use this approach of being clear and being specific when we're setting our goals in any aspect of life, from, like he's saying, from our personal relationships to our business pursuits to our health pursuits, just being really, really clear and specific. So I love hearing his stories to help remind us of this important point.
Yeah, I really like that at the end where I won't say he flips it, but he definitely reapplies what he's talking about to something even more impactful when he brings it to personal relationships as being the specific thing that you're approaching. I enjoyed that. It's just a little snippet at the end, but it was a cool way for the lesson to kind of close. Yeah. All right. So I've got some questions here to discuss. And I think the first question is one that I probably kind of repeat a little bit because I think it's the core of this lesson, and that is about specificity. So he gives this example of a poorly defined goal that led to results that he didn't really want because it didn't encapsulate the goal clearly enough. But if I have to read this goal every morning and every night and focus my mind around every detail so that it's crystallized in my mind, how much detail is enough and how much detail is too much? Later on, he talks about, putting it on a 3x5 card and that being the right amount for these 10 goals or whatever. And if you've listened to the Dynamic Living Seminar, you're familiar with that method. But is that how small can my handwriting be? Right. I've seen people get pretty inventive with how small and how specific they can write. But is that really going to help us more with our goal? Or is there a proper amount of specificity that our goals really need?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think you could read a lot of different experts who would have different opinions about that. If I'm thinking about Dad's opinion, I mean, obviously, if he is encouraging people to write their goals on a 3x5 card, it really only gives you the space to write about one sentence per goal. If he is encouraging, 10 goals. So, but I think that's just about right, to be honest, because if we start putting too many words in describing our goals, I think we can lose the power of our words rather than increase the power of our words. I've read something recently about the power of 7 words being like a really effective amount of words to describe like a mission or a goal or things of that nature. Because when you're forced to say something in 7 words or less, every word matters, and you work to find the absolute correct words rather than just, I can use these 4 adjectives to say pretty much what I mean, instead of doing the work to, I'm going to get all the way down to the exact word that I'm looking for because I have to say it in 7. So I think that that's a good tip. And it's something that I have tried to be a little bit more deliberate with in both my goals and my personal affirmations. Because my personal affirmations can tend to get very wordy as well, because I like words and I like being a little poetic or whatever. But the problem is when you are reading it every morning and every night, it can feel like now I have a chore to go read all of these paragraphs of, writing rather than just, really the words that are the most powerful, that are putting into our brain what we really, really want. So I think that's one thing is 7 words. I also think that there's a framework, and I'm not sure where it originated. Maybe it's the Simon Sinek Start With Why. But this framework that actually my life coach has been helping me use in a couple of areas is a why, how, what framework. So as you're working on kind of a big goal, you might not need to do this for every goal that you set in your life, but as you're working on a big goal, starting with the why, and then the how, and then the what. The what is actually what the goal is, right? But the why and the how kind of help us put legs to that goal, put that clear and specific description to that goal, and really connect that goal with emotion, with purpose, so that when we read the why, how, what framework that we've put our goal into, it just feels really, really powerful. So, I mean, we've done that with our church. We've done that with our business. We've done that with Circle A stuff, because it just helps to tie the goal back to the reason that we're setting the goal in the first place. And one thing I've learned about that is that when we're thinking about our why, sometimes we have to dig a few layers deep. So, if it's a weight loss goal, for example, the first why to lose 10 pounds might be so that I'll fit in my clothes better. But is that really the why? Is that really like the driving purposeful force, or is that just the first layer of the why? So then what's the second layer of the why? Maybe it's so that I'll feel more confident around my friends and at work. And that's, maybe that's the bigger why, but there might even be another layer under that of so that, and I don't know exactly where to take it, but for some people, it might be, so that I am thriving as the best version of myself, or so that I feel like I'm stewarding the body that God gave me, or whatever the big why is. It kind of takes a few layers of digging to get there. But when we do that, when we do why, how, what, then when we get to the what, we're really clear, because we've laid out the why and we've laid out the how. So there's a couple tips about about defining clearly and specifically.
I love that. I've added to my notes. That was a great response. I love just the 7 words thing is really cool, because there's such power in limitations, right? You can it really confines you to dig deep.
Yep.
But then this onion of why, that's very cool too. I love it. Thank you. That's a great response.
Great.
All right. So moving on to question 2 then. If it is defined clearly and specifically and the goal gets accomplished in a satisfactory way, but it's not the way I defined it, do I need to reject those results? Do I need to reject that outcome and keep trying to go for the outcome that I detailed, that I really wanted? I remember there's a story that Dad uses in seminar that I always loved because it's about cars, and I always thought that was just a fun thing to listen to. It was about I think a business partner of his that had a goal of getting a brand new Maserati, and he had a picture of a Maserati on his door as he left his house, and he would see that exact Maserati and envision himself sitting in the Maserati, and made all these goals and plans around owning that and saving. And one day he had the money and he had the availability. So he went to the dealership, he got the car, the exact specificity of how he wanted it. And they delivered it, and it was not the car that he specified, but it was an amazing car. It was better than what he had ordered because they weren't able to get it in that specific design that he wanted. Mm-hmm. He rejected it. And he said, I don't want that car. Tell me when you have my car. And he left the dealership. And so finally they said, well, don't leave. We do have the one that you want, but it's a show car. It's one that we have used. And he's like, well, I don't want it then. That's not the car that I envisioned.
Right.
He's like, well, just come see it. And so they bring him around to see it, and it's the exact car from the picture. And because he rejected the outcome that he didn't really want, he got the exact result that he wanted.
Yep.
So when is the right time to reject what you thought, what you thought you wanted, but it wasn't quite there?
Right.
How do you know when to keep striving, even though you've gotten a result that's good enough?
Yeah, it's a tricky question. And these stories are so interesting, like that Maserati story and the story that Dad told on this podcast too, about he got to be on the cover of the Ammogram. He got invitations to these homes, but they weren't exactly what he had intended. So I think that it really depends on whether or not the outcome was actually the goal, or if the way you executed the strategy of that goal was really wrapped up in the goal. So I think there's a difference between clearly defining the end goal, because like in Dad's story, the end goal that he defined was being on the cover of the Ammogram. That was the end goal, right? But in his mind, the thing he didn't define was the strategy of getting there, which included attaining this particular level in the business. And so the reality is that in itself was a goal, the achieving diamond. And that part in that moment of the story wasn't achieved yet. So in that sense, no, we don't reject the win of being on the Ammogram. That's amazing, but there's still a goal to achieve. And it's the going diamond for Dad, right? So I think that sometimes the how doesn't matter as much as other times. If it's a weight loss goal and you get to the number and it maybe wasn't with the, plan that you were thinking, maybe you found a different plan and you did that plan instead. Well, then it doesn't matter because you met the goal. But if it's the steps of getting to the goal were also goals in and of themselves, and you missed those things, then I would say, it's time to set another goal, including those steps along the way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think that's a great response to that question. I did remember as you were giving this response that I did want to touch on that question that I had at the beginning of the episode, right, which was, what do you fall back on when you feel like your passion for this thing is waning, or it's not where it once was, but you still have this goal that you're striving towards? What keeps you going towards that accomplishing of that goal? Or, is it time to reassess? Or does there need to be something underneath that passion to keep you, I guess the word that I'm thinking is disciplined to keep going?
Right. Yeah. I mean, to me, it's that why. It's that why, because that's really the reason, that you're achieving the goal in the first place. So back to the weight loss thing, if it's just a matter of losing the 10 pounds, everything is distracting and discouraging and, or if you lose the 10 pounds once and then it's a matter of keeping it off, like that's way harder. And if you're not really dialed into the why you want to be at that particular weight, it's going to be 10 times harder to maintain it. But if you are dialed in, and it's not just a why of so I can look better, but it's really down to the core reason that it's important to you, then it's much easier to keep that burning desire alive. So I think that's why it's so important, even though we know our big whys and we know our personal affirmations and things like that, I think it's super important to take every goal and go through that why, how, what exercise, even if you don't read the whole, in the way that I do my why, how, what's is I get 7 words for each. So that's more words than 7, right? Obviously.
Well, I mean, it keeps to the rule a little.
Yeah, it does. It does. But I don't necessarily read, a why and a how for every goal every day. But even going through that process so I can refer back to that when I stall out on a goal or when I have to keep the fire alive once I've, done the initial effort or things like that, having the why and the how is really helpful.
Okay. Thank you for that bonus answer, because I think that gives a little bit more clarity and specificity to the previous episode, but also into this episode. All right. So question number 3 then. What if the specifics of the goal are outside of my ability to control? How do I define them if I can't control them? And what do I do if I can't ever get the results that I want? I think an example of that I was just thinking of is, let's say that there's a specific job at the company that I'm working at that I really want, but somebody already has that job. Do I just say, well, my goal is that Jim has been fired and that I am loving my new corner office? Or is there a proper way to make a goal that, is outside of your realm of control?
Yeah, I mean, yes, there are obviously, lots of people do. I do from time to time, but it's harder. Like those goals feel more risky and they feel more vulnerable and they take a greater degree of courage because it is outside of your control. So, there are goals on my list for the year that I know exactly how I'm going to achieve them. Like reading 24 books this year is one of my goals. I had the 24 books picked before the year even started. So it's just a matter of like getting the book out and going through the pages, and it's completely 100% in my control. But there are other goals on my list where I don't necessarily know how exactly I'm going to achieve it. And it does depend on things other than me. It's not just a matter of my time or my skill to make certain things happen. Right. So I think that it's good to have a mix of goals like that. I think if all of our goals are the out of our control type, then we might find ourselves frustrated or disillusioned. Because some of those may not happen in the time frame that we want them to happen in. Some of them might. And obviously reading them every morning and every night and doing everything we can to focus on movement towards them is going to bring them about eventually or to some degree. But it's also good to have goals where this is in my control. And if I execute these tasks and I do these habits, I will achieve this goal. And it's great to have goals like that as well. So I always try to have a mix of both. But I think for the ones that are outside of our control, like the example of wanting a job that somebody else already has. I think it's best this is what I think Dad would say. It's best to fill our minds with what is possible, not what is not possible. So instead of saying, I'll never have that job because this person already has it, so that doesn't get to go on my goal list, we say, I know I would be great at this job. It would fill me. It would excite me. And so I'm going to set a goal to have this job, even though I don't know exactly how that could be possible. Maybe our company is going to need 2 people in that role at some point. Maybe that person is going to move up and there's going to be an open space for me. I don't know how it's going to open up for me, but I believe that I'm the best person to do this particular job. So it's still going to go on my goal list. And I'm going to believe that there is possibility beyond what I can see in this moment. So I think it's great to have a balance of both. I think it's also great to keep our minds in that possibility space.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm glad that your response wasn't just make your goal how to get Jim fired, because I think that would have been a derailment of the idea. Yeah. No, I think that's a great response. And I definitely have goals like that too. And I definitely feel like they can be frustrating if you're thinking about them every single day and you know that that's not something that is completely within your control. But when you keep it in that framework of what is possible and those things that can excite you and fill you with passion, I think that's the right mentality to have every morning, every night. And I think that's a great response. And I love this episode because, well, one, it's the good old dynamic living seminar stuff. And it's also stories that, we've heard 100 times, but are always fun to hear again. And I'm excited for the next episode because it is getting even more into it. So if you know Circle A, you know where we're going, you're going to have a great time too. Do you have any closing thoughts on this episode, Melody?
Absolutely. Well, I anticipate that we are all going to set some exciting goals after going through this process together, listening to these podcasts from Skip, and just being encouraged and inspired to think carefully about how we're investing our time and our mental resources in goal setting. So I'm excited to hear some stories from you guys about the goals achieved, and excited to share some stories of my own as we continue on this journey together.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining us on this journey with the Reflections Cast. And remember that your support means everything. So if you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to hit that like button, write us a review, or leave us a voicemail. And please share this episode with friends, family, or anyone you think might benefit from our discussions. We believe in you. We're committed to help you thrive on your journey of discovering all you were created to be. And until next time, keep reflecting, keep growing, and pass it on.